Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pittsburgh Steelers Depot live stream. I am Alex Kozora. Joining me as always is Dave Bryan answering your Steelers questions through the top of the hour. Dave, unfortunately our first off-season live stream as the Pittsburgh Steelers fell to the Baltimore Ravens 28-14 on Saturday in the wildcard game. Pittsburgh's playoff drought continues. Their losing streak extends, and it has not been a fun 5 weeks or so for us, for those listening, and any Steeler fan across the board. So a lot to talk about today, much of it negative, unfortunately, but that's what happens when you lose 5 straight and bottom out the way that Pittsburgh has. Dave, how you doing?
I'm not well, Alex. I'm scared. These people are going to eat us alive tonight, I think, and they're going to make tools and musical instruments out of our bones, I think.
Oh, wow.
This might be the end of us tonight. I don't know. Other than that, I guess I'm okay. Got a little bit of wax in my ears, but I think that pales in comparison about what we're going to go through tonight with these folks.
Yeah, be gentle with us. We are just the messengers, and we did not take the field on Saturday, although you'd wonder if we did, if the results would have been a whole lot different, with Pittsburgh allowing 299 on the ground over 460 of total yardage against Baltimore, and that just looked like uncompetitive football in a lot of respects, especially early on. As always, here till 8 p.m., send us questions in the chat. Dave and I will try to maneuver through them, answer as many as possible. If you want a guarantee of your question being asked and answered by Dave and myself, you can send us a super chat. No obligation to do so, but we appreciate them all the same. And that's where we'll start tonight with our friend Double HH, kicking us off with a very generous $20 super chat. So thank you, Double HH, longtime friend of the stream. Says, thanks, Dave B and Alex K, for the timely content and analysis again this season. I'm off soon to see one of my kids studying abroad, so we'll be MIA until draft time. What conceivable draft day wheeling and dealing can you see? Well, thank you for that, Double HH, and safe and happy travels. We'll talk to you when the time comes. The draft, though, is going to be a long ways away. It's hard to predict down how this thing's going to look. Pittsburgh officially picking 21st overall. Is there any scenario in which Pittsburgh could explore wheeling and dealing for a quarterback, Dave?
I mean, there's always a scenario. I've learned over the years to never say never. You go back to the whole Devin Bush trade up years ago in that situation. Obviously, it wasn't a quarterback. Have not, obviously, just starting to get into researching more about this year's draft class. And from what I gather so far, it's not a great quarterback draft class. I think it's going to be obviously headlined by Shedeur Sanders, and you see the name of Cam Ward being floated around and all like that. Knowing how quarterbacks usually go early in this thing, and let's assume both those guys, by the time the dust clears, are considered top 10 guys. I find it hard to believe that they would go up as high to get a guy like Sanders. I just don't see that happening. Who else would be in consideration, first round consideration, that could potentially be on the board? Close to that, I haven't even gotten that far yet. My gut feeling this far out from this thing would be that this team wouldn't go up to get a quarterback. But once again, I've got so much to learn about the quarterbacks in this draft class. I however, would think that this team, depending on how this shakes out with what they do with their quarterback plan, whether it be Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, both, neither, someone else, Sam, see what obviously happens with Sam Darnold, and hopefully Aaron Rodgers retires so we don't have to write 30 posts about that. But from this team does have a lot of needs as usual in the draft, but I would not be opposed of a third, fourth, round, whatever, mid-round type of guy just to have as a project. You never know what you get out. You're always going to need a backup or a third string quarterback. And, this, I would not be opposed to going that route. But from where we sit right now, I'd find it kind of hard to fathom that this team would trade up to get a quarterback in the first round.
I would too, but nothing I suppose off the table, especially that no quarterbacks are currently under contract for 2025 that will dominate the landscape in the conversation. Is it Russ? Is it Fields? Is it neither? And if it's neither, then who? I'd be more opposed personally to that mid-round quarterback option, but wouldn't shock me if Pittsburgh did add somebody, to have additional guys to evaluate and have some guys under contract on the cheap for the next 4 years. In terms of other draft stuff, Omar Khan's certainly shown a willingness to make trades. We saw that in his first draft class back there in 2023, it would have been, but each year is unique and unpredictable, and draft trades in particular are tough to judge even when you're right up near the draft, because it depends on offers, opportunities, how the board breaks, and a million different variables that Pittsburgh alone does not control. So fair question, but we'll talk about that certainly in a couple of months. I want to remind you guys, if you could hit the like button for this stream, bring more Steeler fans into the chat, would appreciate that. Be sure to also subscribe to the channel and, of course, check out the site, SteelersDepot.com. Mike Tomlin speaking Tuesday at 12:30 for his year-end press conference, and we'll see what light he has to shed on his thoughts on the quarterback situation. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields both expressing a desire to return. We'll see who actually does. Got another super chat in here from Andrew Waddell, who says, $5 super chat. What part of the team did you see improve on tape week 1 to week 18? Not individual performance, but group performance, D-line coverage, blocking. So collective improvement from a unit. It's obviously a little harder to probably pinpoint when you're talking about a 5-game losing streak. Was there any unit that you just felt over the course of the entire season in totality, Dave, get better?
Oh, the thing is you've got to include those final 5 games within that as well, too. There was a midpoint of the section where it looked like that offensive line was doing a little bit better collectively as a run unit, and then that went away, in the latter part of the season. It's hard to look at it as a unit overall and say from week 1 through the wild card game that a unit improved from game 1 to the wild card unit. It just is, I thought for a moment in time the tight end group was doing a little bit better collectively, let's say as a run blocking unit. Then that sort of went away. As well too. There were some bright spots, I guess, at times. I mean, the short answer is I cannot come up with a position group that from week 1 through the wild card game that you could say collectively got better as a unit. It's hard to pick that out.
I would too, and even things like coverage and blocking and some of those broader terms is still hard to find kind of one aspect of this team that improved. But as you said, that's what happens when you lose 5 straight and don't have a lead for a single solitary moment of those 5 games. Only the third time in team history that's occurred, 1969, 1938, the others. And so that's company and errors you certainly do not want to keep. I mean, at times the inside linebacker group felt, stronger overall, but I don't know if I would say that they had clear improvement from start to finish. I mean, I think Peyton Wilson did some nice things as a rookie. His size, athleticism on display, some of the matchups he can, defend when facing those athletic pass-catching backs like a Justice Hill. Landon Roberts played well, I thought, wire to wire. Patrick Queen was more up and down, but wasn't a bad first year for him overall. So maybe that, but as you said, it's really hard to point towards improvement week 1 to week 18, given how wild card game, given how poor this year finished up.
Was the high point of the season the win over the Bengals when they came back and put the points that they did? Was that the high point? Was that when
you could
most
argue
of us
that
were smelling ourselves the most?
I'd probably say the win over Baltimore. Again, you beat Washington week 10 out of the bye. You beat Baltimore week 11. Quality wins over what turned out to be playoff teams and teams still in the playoffs. I would probably consider that to be the high point of the season.
Okay.
All right, going back here to our questions, and let's go to Lumberzack74. Says, hey guys, thanks for well-reported 2024. Appreciate you guys and the Steelers Depot team more than you could ever know. We thank you for that. Anyway, how would you guys evaluate Keanu Benton's second season? Didn't light up the stat sheets, but feels like he still took a step in the right direction. Would you guys move him out of the nose next season, presumably to defensive end? Dave, your thoughts on Benton year 2? Would you keep him at nose tackle? Would you kick him out?
I thought he had his peaks and valleys like a lot of players in this. I mean, he's still got to come up with another move over the other than that club and over. I thought this was a guy we'd be talking about 4 or 5 sacks with. The issue with him still stands. Got to finish better. Got to do a better job of keeping containment while rushing in key situations. Moving him to defensive end, that's I mean, we did at least get to see him in sub package more, right? As the season went on there. I guess it depends on what the alternative plan would be in base at nose there. I would be worried, I think, about. I mean, I would like to see him battle more guards, on a more consistent basis. But until he comes up with counters other than club and overs and trying to bull, it does make you kind of concerned about moving him out to kind of opposite what Cam Hayward would be. Cam Hayward's got such the arsenal, right? He's got the bull, he's got the club, he's got the over, he's got the swim, he's got the move inside. Have we seen the full arsenal for Benton? I just think it was overall kind of a disappointing season, I think, when it comes to Keanu Benton. Once again, I thought he had his highs, but I thought he didn't make the progress that I thought he would make this year. So if you're going to move him out of the nose to the outside, do you think he? I don't have enough info to say whether or not I think he'd be a good fit more on the outside.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment overall. There was, as you said, some progress. His athleticism, his effort, his bend, I think, is really impressive for a guy of his stature and the position in which he plays. You do wonder, is the anchor good enough for run defense at nose tackle? There's a line between, you don't want your guy to be that old school 3-4 plugger that can't rush the passer. You need guys who are athletic, guys can get after the quarterback, but you do need guys that can stop the run. And when you allow 299 in this wildcard game, and you allow 220 in the game before against Baltimore, and the Eagles run all over you, and you just get really dominated up front, where teams control time of possession, and how much was Pittsburgh out-snapped during this stretch? It was a terrible amount, and so you do wonder, can you find somebody that can play the run first? Pittsburgh's whole theory of the case, their whole defensive structure is still built around stopping the run. Now, of course, Benton at defensive end would still have to do the same, so it's kind of some competing factors. I do still generally like him at nose tackle for being able to win in those short areas, those small spaces against guards and centers one-on-one, which he wouldn't have that advantage as much against some of the bigger, longer guys at tackle. So I think short answer is I would keep him where he's at, but I just think across the board, this defensive line, this front, you got to find some guys that are a little more hard-edged, a little stronger, a little tougher, meaner against the run than what Pittsburgh has as a current collective.
I think when you come out of this game at Baltimore, and we said this on the podcast today, you got to take a hard look at that defensive line group going into the draft and going into free agency here. My recommendation is to cut Larry Ogunjobi, and if you do that, and look, Montravius Adams is just a guy. If they bring Isaiah Loudermilk back, he's just really just a guy. Montravius Adams is really just a guy. Leal has not lived up to expectations yet, and then you have a young guy in Logan Lee that's got that. You've still got a lot to find out about him at this point. They played him over the nose mostly during the preseason, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to learn about what can he do? As a 3-eye, 4-eye 3 tech type of guy there. So you got a lot of, and then Cam Hayward's going to be another year older. Is it fair to expect Cam Hayward to duplicate the kind of season that he had? Not saying he can't, but I mean, you need to start thinking about, what are you going to do to not give up 300 yards on the ground against the Ravens again next year.
Yeah, that's such a sour taste in my mouth, Dave, to not just lose, but it's kind of Bill Cowher talked about how Pittsburgh lost. To be embarrassed like that against Baltimore in their place is not the standard Pittsburgh should be setting. So there's issues in the secondary, there's issues across the team, but I think it has to start up front. If Pittsburgh can't do that, then nothing else really works for them defensively. Got 100 people here in the chat, so nice start here. Got a lot of people, I think, coming in to hear our thoughts and ask some questions about this team now that the offseason has officially begun, so we'll try to get to as many as possible. Let's go to Mike Cadesso, our friend, next, who says, do you think Art Rooney is just going to copy and paste his speech to the media last year for his upcoming one? What do you think he could add to it this year that he wants to see? It's a great question. I mean, I don't expect him to go out there and throwing chairs and, acting like Jerry Jones with some big proclamations or all in or all out or anything like that. I think last year was as close as honest and transparent as we've heard from Rooney in a while. Talked about his frustration of this team not advancing, frustrations I assume that have been furthered. But in terms of what he's going to say and how he's going to frame things and with a vision and approach and eye towards 2025, I think it'll be typical Rooney type stuff. It'll probably be about getting the run game going, stopping the run, some of the very basic and figurative and literal blocking and tackling for this team. And that's probably going to be his philosophy and mindset when he speaks with the media.
Yeah, I would imagine he's going to be asked about kind of have the quote from last year thrown to him about it's time, tired. What was the exact words that he used last January?
Essentially impatient.
Right. Let me see if I've got that in here.
Get it on screen here. I think it was a patient comment from Rooney.
I think there's an urgency. Everybody, myself, Mike, guys who have been on the team for a while, TJ, Cam, everybody, we've had enough of this. It's time. I'm adding inflection to Spike. We've had enough of this. It's time to get some wins. It's time to take these next steps. So, yeah, I think there's some urgency here for sure. There's a resolve there and a determination there, getting a little impatient. We need to see the kind of improvement we all want to see. Mike believes that as firmly as anybody else in the building. I would imagine this very quote. I mean, if you're doing your job in the media, you're going to throw back this quote to Art Rooney II later this month, right?
Sure, you should. Those were his words. They were clear. And again, for him, as about as angry sounding as you're going to get Rooney to get. And yet the results in totality and season's end are the same.
And however he answers that question, then a follow-up will be what gives you hope that Mike Tomlin can accomplish that this year?
The truth is, all the money I just paid him that I'm now on the hook for, but I'd be very curious of what that answer is, absolutely.
And then there will be a jigsaw puzzle reference in there related to the cap. It's a giant puzzle. We'll get that. I'm sure he'll be asked about, does he want Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields back? And he'll probably dance around that. Mm-hmm. We won't get the biggest part of this, I'm sure, will be the whole throwback to last year. That will probably be the most talked about aspect of this press of his end of the year media session, is how he answers having last year's comments thrown back at him, and then how he answers why does he believe Mike Tomlin can finally get this team over a hump and win a playoff game.
Yeah, that's fair, and I basically expect it to go that way. So he usually speaks more towards the end of the month, and so probably when the bat signal is going to go up. All right, Carl Ward says, what do you guys think of changing the defensive scheme entirely? Steelers have run the 3-4 for so long. With Tomlin calling it, just seems like the good teams have him completely figured out. Still dealing with a little cough myself, so I'm going to go cough, suppress it for a second here. Dave, what are your thoughts here, Steelers changing the 3-4 scheme?
Well, so this rolls back to the whole sub package is so prevalent now. So a lot of a lot of times the Steelers included have to play four up front anyway. They just choose to do it with a little bit kind of different player in an outside linebacker in that situation there. So they're built, the players that they have, especially the long-term guys that they have right now on the defensive side of the ball up front are obviously T.J. Watt, Alex Highsmith. They're not going to throw that away and then all of a sudden make them kind of be base ends like you see in a more traditional like the Bengals are built, so to speak there. So I think that and obviously sub package you hope to not be in base all that much. So I think it's just the type of body types, what they ask the defensive front to do is the reason why they'll stick with that.
Yeah, I think at this point, as you said, defenses are so multiple. We are so far removed from just, are you a 4-3 team? Are you a 3-4 team? There's so much more complexity than that. And even if you are a 4-3 team, there's so much behind it schematically in terms of how you one gapping team, are you two gapping team, are you a stunting team, what your sub package look like, what your coverage is. I mean, there's so much more than that. So I get the general maybe premise of the question. Should there be some schematic changes? Maybe there should be, but I still think you stick with the 3-4. It's still what you've invested in. I think you'd have some unintended consequences of trying to change that with the guys that you have under contract and the money that you paid, Watt, Highsmith, etc. So don't have an appetite to change. And again, those changes probably, and in fact, do run deeper than just are you an even front or an odd front in your base package. All right, let's go to the next question. It comes from Zachary Prosbus. Says, what coaches are you moving on from? For me, it's Terrell Austin, Pat Meyer, Eddie Faulkner, and Denzel Martin. That would be the defensive coordinator, the O-line coach, the running backs coach, and the outside linebackers coach. Dave talked about this on the podcast a little bit today. What changes would you make if you were Art Rooney?
So he said he would change out all those, huh?
Yes, Zachary says he would get rid of those 4 names.
Well, we talked about that on the podcast this morning. I would definitely take a hard first one outdoor for me would be Pat Meyer. I think it's time, especially with this youth that you have in there right now. You just have not seen the progress, and then you've had a couple of failed selections along with that, with Kendrick Green and Kevin Dotson. Bad analysis when it came to Kendrick Green. Obviously, that was before Pat Meyer, but nothing ever came of that. They never could develop Kevin Dotson properly, and thus, because of those 2 wasted picks, as we talked about on the show this morning, it forced you to go back into the draft probably sooner than you wanted to address those positions there. So I think it's time to get someone better offensive or a different offensive line coach, and hope that you can develop these young guys that you've invested in. Tano will be back in the fold next year, hopefully healthy, and go from there. I think you got to take a look. Somebody, like it or not, somebody's got to pay for that 300 yards on the ground, and that somebody probably needs to be Terrell Austin at this point. Now, the whole contractual situation. Supposedly just signing him recently. Going to be interesting to see how all that play out. But those would be the 2 at the top of my list. And as I mentioned on the show this morning, I'd take a hard look at and you mentioned you brought up Carl Dunbar. I think it's fair to look at that coming off of this game. I think it's fair to also look at Alfredo Robertson, the tight ends, and maybe think about making a change at that coaching position.
Positional coaches are always extremely tough to evaluate. There's so much behind the scenes that we don't get to see and evaluate to really be able to, I think, accurately talk about the merits of their job. And certainly when you dive into, who do you want to see replaced? But I'm with you on Meyer. I've come around to that. I've defended him probably more than most, but I just think collectively the group has not taken the strides and steps forward that they need to. There's been some individual growth with Frazier. I thought McCormick did a nice job overall, given all on his plate. But I just haven't seen the growth on the zone schemes, which are so part and parcel to Arthur Smith's system. A lot of confusion, miscommunication, free runners, that are just wrecking the Steelers run game, and it really, really faded down the stretch. And so I think it's probably time for a change there. And then I've always been a big fan of Carl Dunbar too, but I do think, like you said, with the way this defense has been run on, that's a really big alarm bell. maybe time for a change to make there. I think Dunbar's a good coach overall, but just based on the lack of productivity from that group, in a sea change where you may get younger. Dunbar also works with the edge guys, and Pittsburgh's pass rush the last 2 years have not been quite as potent as they were in that 50 sack streak they were going through for 5 straight seasons. They're at 40, I think, this year and maybe even last year as well. And so I think that those are the 2 names that come to mind. I like Terrell Austin more than most. I think I get a lot of hate and pushback for that. But as we talked about in the podcast this morning, it's harder to tell, who has their hands in this defense, given that Tomlin is so involved. All right, next question. And as David O says, if you guys could like this stream, would appreciate that. Let's see, Matt, do you think it's just coaching changes or does deeper than that? Should players be traded or let go? A complete reset? Well, certainly players are going to be going to. There's going to be a fair amount of roster turnover based on the 24 plus free agents and pending free agents, and many of those guys won't come back, so it's certainly not just coaching. But yeah, I just wonder, and we talked about it on the podcast too, Dave, the culture for this team. When you see this team 5 straight losses, uncompetitive football, get embarrassed the way they were embarrassed against Baltimore, to me those start ringing bigger and deeper alarm bells than just roster and personnel.
Well, look, in any given team around the NFL, I don't know what the average is, but probably at least a third. You have probably around a third globally on average of roster turnover, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right. This team has 24 players that were under contract as the season ended that are going to be unrestricted free agents. A lot of them, most of them, the screen door can hit them in the as they go out the door. The few that are worth signing or re-signing, it's not going to take a lot to do that, if you ask me. And then you throw in draft class on top of it. It wouldn't be a shock if you saw damn near close to a 50% turnover on this roster, right?
It wouldn't, but it feels like they've done, not saying they can't and they shouldn't, but there's been heavy turnover on this roster for a couple seasons. Omar Khan has really changed it, and so you wonder, does it go deeper than that? Because turnover alone is not solving this.
Right. It goes back to his point. How much, how much of it is coaching? How much of is talent? The answer is yes. I mean, this team for those final 5 games certainly didn't look like that team through the first half. The team that got them to, what were they, 10-3, I guess, at one point and all. That needs to be examined. And yeah, I realize they had a couple injuries along the way, but when you like we talked about on the podcast this morning, you got to that Baltimore game and you're thinking, oh, right, got Deshaun Elliott back, got Larry Ogunjobi back, got Joey Porter, who missed a good section of that first Ravens game, back. Dante Jackson back, and I'm just talking about the defensive side of the ball. There, you're thinking, okay, you got guys back, and then you go out and you give the performance that you gave against the Ravens in the wild card game there. So, look, this thing needs to be, not that it's not gone over with a fine tooth comb every offseason, but you really got to examine this thing, especially if you want to give Mike Tomlin a fighting chance at this thing right now, and coaches included. I mean, this thing, short of what they would traditionally call a complete blow up. I mean, whatever the step below that is of trading everybody away. Do I think they're going to trade people away, especially on the defensive side of football? No. But I think you need to take a hard look at this whole thing and seriously consider close to a 50% turnover from the 53-man roster that you ended the season with.
And really try to define your identity, what kind of team you want to be, not just in style, but in the people that you want to be part of that too. I know that's always part of their process, but there's just something missing. Even as tough as the schedule was, if you just don't lose 5 games in completely uncompetitive fashion like that, to not lead for a minute and then get just run out of Baltimore the way Pittsburgh did, it's just something there does not sit well with what we saw, not just in the losses, but the manner in which Pittsburgh lost.
Mm-hmm.
Got a $10 super chat in from, suppressing a cough again. Rob Jones sends in the $10 super chat. Says, assuming Arthur Smith is back, wouldn't Tyler Warren be the absolute perfect pick for his system? I know he'll be drafted as a tight end, but weapon would be more his position. So already early draft talk. That's the tight end out of Penn State who had a fantastic season. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. It's a little Brock Bowers last year where he has a tight end, but he's just going to be an offensive, chess piece for you and focus on talent. Don't focus so much on the position, but you do have Pat Frymuth, Darnell Washington. You're technically still not adding another receiver. What do you think, Dave?
I don't think it's a crazy idea that what Rob offers up, if indeed you decided to address the offensive side of the football early in this draft, and assuming that Arthur Smith's back, and assuming Arthur Smith continues wanting to run a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, you've got to get away from having to use Michael Pruitt and Connor Hayward as much as you did. You need weapons on this team, and as far from what I know about the Penn State tight end so far, he does look like one of the best well-rounded guys. You saw him line up in the backfield. He's an ex-quarterback too, right? So you could do some stuff along with that. So I don't think this early in the process, I don't know where the kid's going to get drafted at. I mean, but if let's say you get in a situation where he is on the board at 21 and you decide not to go corner, wide receiver, or defensive line with that pick, then I think that's a fine end of January suggestion as far as maybe a potential player to look at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I don't want to sit there and say no to any idea, especially when you're looking at talent and fit, and you talk about the guys that you want your team and the style in which they play and the physicality they bring. He certainly is going to offer that. Just a question of is there going to be enough snaps to go around? Can you get good return on investment? He'd likely require to be a first-round pick, that 21st overall selection, and still, you need some receivers. You need some guys on the outside. I think this season has only reaffirmed that Pittsburgh has not done a good job in doing that in their sense of let's just be tight end heavy and have one receiver and we'll make it work. It did not work. And so, I still have some hesitation to the idea, but it is super early and I don't want to close any doors, here in January about potential options come April. All right, next question comes from a fellow Alex, not me, says, it seems like Tomlin's only strategy to win games is to win the turnover battle. I realize turnovers are important, but why can't they focus on outplaying teams? Well, I mean, turnover battle is a component of outplaying teams, and I think there's a lot to be said, and I'm all for defenses that can take away the football in this age where you have great talents, and it's hard to get teams to go 3 and out and punt consistently, and that can be the great elixir. But yeah, I understand the overall point of, not having to play from behind to dig out of holes and start slow. And I thought it was interesting. Pat Frymuth talked about today that his focus is this offseason is going to be on how does the team start faster? How does the offense start faster? 48 points in the first quarter this year, less than three per game. And yet Mike Tomlin has always seemed to pay that such little mind. And I hope during that Tuesday press conference tomorrow, he's asked about those comments. Will you reevaluate kind of your stance on not being defined by slow starts and seemingly giving it a pass? I wonder and hope that his philosophy has changed.
I'd laugh, and I'm not laughing at the question. I'm laughing at really what the talk has become these last couple seasons, the Mike Tomlin rock fight game plan, where it does feel like the focus going into these games is, all right, boys, ball security, convert third and shorts, convert down low in the red zone. Don't turn the football over. Get that football out on the other side. Make 5 more plays than the other team. Keep this game close in the fourth quarter, and we'll win it.
Yeah, and that's essentially
what
the idea.
Break.
That's essentially what the idea was and what they did. And to their credit, that's been proven to be the best way they know how to win games.
I mean, look, we've talked about this as a season, especially after Mike Tomlin kind of said, more worried about how we end games than how we started. I'm ready to start talking about some opening drive touchdowns again. I'm ready to start talking about first quarter touchdowns again. I'm ready to revisit some days where you have maybe even a touchdown lead at halftime, or maybe God forbid, a 10-point lead at halftime. Those kind of things there. It's almost like copy and paste. That every fourth quarter of every game, the Steelers are probably going to be behind, and can, or if they are ahead, they're a 3-point lead. Can they hold on, and will they fall behind, and will they come back and get that last possession drive to go down and win? The offensive side of football needs to be looked at just as heavily as the defensive side of football. They've got to start setting the tone earlier in the games. You got to see less 3 and outs. We got to, look, there were times, especially in the first half, into maybe the early portion of the second half of the year, where they were moving the football, but they weren't scoring the football. I mean, that's obviously an improvement over not moving the football at all. But I mean, it all comes down to more than just possession the football and moving it and playing the field position game. You got to score it. We've got to see faster starts from this team. And yeah, I hope Mike Tomlin is asked about, will he revisit his stance on faster starts?
Because it is fascinating to me, Dave, in a tragic kind of sense, that Pittsburgh can be this consistently bad at slow starts, just habitual year over year, no matter what. Quarterback changes, OC changes, style changes, no matter what. Pittsburgh just seems to be so bad out of the gate. And to me, you add all that up, that's reflective of philosophy of coaching and what you value. And what you practice is what you preach, and what you demand is what you're going to get. And by that token, what you don't demand, what you don't preach, is you're also going to get that too. And if Tomlin's going to continually downplay the slow starts, they're going to continue until you really work at it. It's not just saying it, of course, but there's going to be some intent behind it in the way that you practice, the manner in which you move. But that's certainly going to be, I think, one thing that has to change. Got a couple of super chats in here, Dave. Let's get to those as you guys get your questions in. Great crowd tonight. We certainly appreciate that. And I think these are really fair and important questions you guys are asking. Friend Tim Chase, $5 super chat, says the last 5 games, the defense played 6 games worth of minutes. This is a complete offensive failure. Time to modernize. Certainly validity to that, Tim, but I would also still say defensively he has to own that as well, not always getting stops. I mean, the Ravens were 10 of 15 on third down in this game. That's going to extend possessions and draw games out and keep your defense on the field. The overall, the third down defense didn't always play up to its level this year. So, yes, the offense had issues, and that put the defense on the field and put more stress and strain on them, but I don't let the defense off the hook either.
Yeah, what about those blown touchdowns too? You get off the field and give up maybe some 3s instead of 7s. The forever miscommunication aspect of this that played a part down the stretch as well too within this. This was a team effort to get to those 5 consecutive losses.
Yeah, for sure. And again, not to lead for a single second of the last 5 games. The last game Pittsburgh led and will lead until they kick off in September was December 8th. I mean, it's just, has any team done that in recent memory? I mean, even the bad teams this year, like the objectively, top 5 picking teams, any of those teams go 5 straight games without leading for a moment? I don't know.
That's a rabbit hole that that would be tough to go down on Stathead, I think.
I'll probably end up trying to anyway, to no avail. $5 super chat from Superstar SS. I don't believe in tanking, but in this case, I can say, let's start the Meh for Manning campaign. I assume that's for Archie down there in Texas. Yeah, next year's quarterback class. I'm not sure if he'd be eligible.
Is that kid? That kid's not coming out. That was a starter, was he?
Quinn Ewers. I thought he was, but he's had a pretty rough year. I don't think he's going to be a blue chip kind of a guy.
Yeah, he had a rough game the other night, that's for sure.
Yeah, chat, let us know. Is Quinn Ewers, did he declare? Is there any finality on his decision? I thought I read a report, yes, but there was a lot of different reports that were coming out, and Mike is saying yes, Ewers is declaring. So
now I know the report came out today that, and it's the right decision, that Aller's going back again, which good for him.
Yeah. After that playoff game, I think certainly a no-brainer decision. There, I was disappointed. Those Penn State running backs I had an eye on, those guys are both staying in Happy Valley. So those were guys I thought could be potential Najee Harris replacements, and obviously that's not going to be the case for 25.
These quarterbacks start staying in school now. Maybe we can go back to the Bill Parcells 7 rules of drafting the quarterback.
Yeah, that is true. Tim Busby, $10 super chat. Thank you so much. Says faster starts allow you to have more possessions of the football. The Eagles and Ravens showed us that. Did Russ do enough to re-sign the normal vet like Baker and Geno Smith? Had a question earlier about should this team re-sign Russ? Did he do enough? It's going to be a big question, big topic of debate.
Everything has its price. So somewhere between minimum salary, which he's not going to take, and probably $30 million, you've got to come up with what price is he worth. I don't think you need to lock yourself into an expensive enough contract where you can't go away from him if you needed to. He definitely did not help his value in these final 5 games. He hurt his value. If you were to end the season after the Bengals game, what would his value be versus where it is now? I will say that I've said this since the season ended on the podcast. I thought he played slightly better, maybe 2% better than I envisioned him playing at the start of the season. That's not saying much, but you look, here's the thing that I hope and I think will happen. You got to get this thing put to bed by March, at least with one of them. Here, this is such rare territory to be talking about a Pittsburgh Steelers team with 0 quarterbacks under contract exiting a season. And when you look at potential outsiders, it's not overly impressive at all. You've got to put this thing to bed pretty quick here.
Yeah, you do. You don't want this to linger. It's tough. The question is, is Wilson a guy do you think that can take you where this offense and this team needs to go? It kind of feels like you saw kind of the best version in a lot of sense of Russ throughout the season. You saw the worst versions of Russ too. You think you got a pretty good feel for the type of player that he is, and you just wonder, is that worth pursuing for a decent amount of money, whatever that number would be, whatever that dollar amount would be, any further? And I really question if it is. I start leaning towards Fields, who I believe can be cheaper and younger and worth taking a look at developing without a ton of all-in kind of risk. And I think you would at least get a good run game and have an attack that could be similar to a Baltimore, maybe not Baltimore of its current form, but earlier Lamar years of Baltimore, or Jalen Hurts and Eagles team in Philadelphia with a rushing threat, and start building around your run game. And if you have to go back to trying to win those rock fights for a little while longer, you're capable of doing it. And I understand the potential cap it puts on your team, but I think you got to get back to base first, and Fields might be that short-term path.
If you concentrated wholly on accentuating the positives of what we know about what Justin Fields has done, what his ceiling is, do you think they can come up with something that would get him to where his adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat number would at least top 6.5?
I think you can get around there. I think you can get above, 6.2. I don't want to get too granular about it, but if you sit there and say, okay, you don't get to 6.5, but his rushing value is able to help kind of reduce that gap in a sense, is that acceptable enough given the options? There's no great. The real disappointment of the season is there's no real clarity on the quarterback situation. This was supposed to be, okay, you bring in Russ for the minimum, you bring in Fields for essentially nothing, let these guys work, compete, and hopefully feel confident about your answer for 2025 in some direction for at least 2025. And to me, Dave, you really did not get much closer to moving the ball forward to figuring out your quarterback of even next year.
How confident would you be in re-signing either one of those guys in making a full-fledged Super Bowl run in 2025? Or are we back to thinking, we just want the the best saltine ever of winning a playoff game.
Yeah, there's no aspirations to me to win a Super Bowl if you pick either of these guys. I don't know what Pittsburgh could do this offseason that would make me think that going into the year.
But they're going to tell you that our intentions is to win the Super Bowl, right?
Sure, it's always their intentions, but we just know the reality of it. But can you build a team that can get you over the hump and win a dang playoff game? Like that's not my goal, but that's the measure of progress that this team has to prove that they're capable of doing before you have any Super Bowl talk. It's like, I want to make $10 million. Well, that's great, but you have to get to $1 million first before you get to 10. So that's got to be the first step that Pittsburgh needs to get to, and that's got to be, for the short term, their focus. Because there is no magic bullet at quarterback. Like there's no.
It doesn't feel like it this offseason.
Especially, and even if there was, the odds of getting him would probably be in the form of he'd be a top blue chip prospect, and Pittsburgh's in no position to acquire that. But even in veteran options, there's no, like, people can speculate about Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers. What are those guys going to do that's going to get you any further? I mean, it's just kind of, to me, at that point, you're really rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Anyway, let's get to some more questions here. About 15 minutes left. I want to try to get through as many as possible. Let me scroll back up. I forget exactly where I left off, but we appreciate the super chats. Anything from the tape? I still don't think the tape has fully come out, Dave. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But any insights? Have any of the game been able to rewatch against Baltimore?
The defense is hard to watch. It really is.
Yeah.
Off of the pro version, and the full reels. Let me double check real quick. They weren't up before we started. I don't think the reels are up right now.
Okay.
They'll come out. They're probably going to wait and upload them after the Monday night game.
That's true. Curly Tom says, "Hey guys, when does the first draft profile come out? What are the biggest needs on this team besides quarterback? Of course, don't have an exact date. We're going to start working on figuring out our own draft plan here. Should be relatively soon, but I don't have an exact date. Hopefully within a week or so, the first draft profiles will start dropping. Other needs, Dave, besides quarterback, Pittsburgh has to really address top of mind going into the offseason."
Defensive line, I think you need to look at that. I think you need to look at cornerback, both an outside guy and see if you can maybe upgrade the slot position over even a guy like Beanie Bishop. Those along with, so
you say
probably
receiver?
Yeah, most definitely wide receiver. You're going to have to hit that maybe even twice in this draft. Here, we'll see what happens with the whole George Pickens thing here. You're going to probably need a Z and an X, right?
I need a route runner, Dave. I need someone who can get open, create space. I don't think Pittsburgh has guys that can do that. So, I mean, that's more of an X mold type. But I think regardless of X and Z, which has become a little more antiquated, this team needs route runners.
Yeah. So they're, even if they foresee George Pickens, re-upping him and him being in the plans, obviously, for at least the final year of his rookie season, along with, you hope Roman Wilson can make a kind of a jump in his second year after not playing but 5 snaps in his rookie season. You obviously have Calvin Austin to fit in there, but you're going to have to fill out the rest of that thing. And Mike Williams is not the answer. Van Jefferson's not the answer. I'm not opposed to Ben Skoranek being back as a number 5 or a number 6 to help on special teams, but you most definitely probably going to have to drop 2 draft picks unless one of those spots you go out and get in free agency in some way, shape, and form. And yes, I'm well aware of T. Higgins, and put my name on every list that you come up with for wide receiver when it comes to T. Higgins. I'm just not convinced that they go full throttle and do that. I hope they do. I gladly be wrong on that. I just don't think they're going to do that.
Yeah, certainly would not be cheap. I'll say slot corner too. I mean, corner in general, but slot corner, Dave. Cam Sutton, goodbye. You need more competition for Beanie Bishop. He's had his own, issues, predictably. Undrafted free agent did put a fair amount on his plate before Cam Sutton came back, but give me a quick trigger, run stop and nickel. I talk about some of the run defense issues and lack of pressure on some of those nickel blitzes. I need someone that can be that Mike Hilton type. I know there's a role in coverage and a value in that, but if you would talk about, again, getting back to kind of basics of being tough and physical and stopping the run, I think Pittsburgh really missed that presence of a nickel corner this year, especially because they were in sub package a lot more than usual. They weren't in base quite as often as they are, which is already a minority of snaps. But you need that dog, I think, at nickel corner, Dave.
If Najee Harris flies the coop, you're probably going to have to burn a pick somewhere on that position. I'm not opposed to adding a tight end somewhere within this thing, one all around that can block and play special teams and function in the passing game. Not opposed to that. And like I said, near the top of this Q&A as well. I mean, if you got the spot and can burn a mid to late round pick on a quarterback, I would not be opposed to that either.
And I would say a veteran offensive tackle, because I just don't think you can fully put Roderick Jones in there and trust him and say, all right, have at it. I think you got to have some backup plans there if Jones does not end up being this guy and what's going to be a critical year 3 for him. And of course, Fautanu is going to be, basically starting from scratch there in year number 2, coming off that knee injury as a rookie. All right, let's try to get through as many questions as possible. Try to go pretty quick. Eastside legend, I should say. I think Fields stays because they gave up a draft pick for him. What do you guys think? I don't think that's going to be the motivating factor for Pittsburgh. It was a 6th-round pick. It was pretty minor compensation. Kevin in Albuquerque, good evening. Dave and Alex, no dining on you. Turkey's in the oven. Thoughts on Pickens' comments and whether he might be draft day trade bait? I believe that's referring to Pickens saying about the offense progressing. I think where our belief is there was probably some misunderstanding or confusion about that question. To me, it's not a huge story, but it doesn't detract from all of Pickens' anxieties and stresses and storylines he loves to create.
We purposely did not kind of write up that quote because we came to the conclusion that he misunderstood the question, right?
Yeah, that was I let Ross McCorkle kind of take the lead because I was writing something else at the time, but we all came to the consensus, and I support that I think that was there was some mis cross wires, because overall Pickens is actually pretty optimistic and mature in that post game press conference.
As far as the whole Pickens things goes, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be something that we're going to write about quite a bit with this being a contract year. If they choose not to entertain trading him, what does the contract look like? How much time will he miss during the offseason if contract negotiations are not up to, it's just going to be a huge topic. Can they fix him as far as everything regarding not playmaking? I mean, the guy is super talented, as I've said 100 times over the course of this thing. You just worry about all the other stuff that comes along with him and how much a distraction and how much will we be talking about that aspect of him, the player, moving forward. But these chats as they go on through the offseason, the post on Depot, there's going to be a lot of George Pickens talk.
For sure. LV, $5 super chat. What does Pat Meyer do differently than other coaches? Would having new O-line coach make players relearn techniques? Is Russ too short to see the field? Yeah, I mean, each O-line coach, like any coach, has their philosophy and style. We've talked about Pat Meyer's on-body, off-body pass sets before. They're more aggressive than other teams where it's not about giving ground. So, yes, players would have to relearn techniques, and there'd be certain strengths and points of emphasis and just overall different approaches from coach to coach, no different than any positional group. So yes, there'd be a relearning and a different, you would assume, technique and philosophy brought in for any change there.
I have nothing to add there. Next question.
Somebody had asked, I think, Ray about, is there any possibility of the team bringing back both Russ and Fields? What would you say to that, Dave?
From a cap and cash perspective, could you do it if both of them, excuse me, if you tried to kind of form a salary cap, a salary maximum that would be along the lines if you had one franchise quarterback per se, right? Let's throw out like say $48 million. Could APY between the both? I'm just randomly throwing that out there. Okay. People say, well, you said this, but from a cap perspective, could you make it work? The answer is always yes. I mean, this team is going to be okay cap-wise this offseason? Would they eschew going down different directions of cap spending to do that? Possibly. It's plausible depending on the price of what it costs for both those guys, obviously. You could get it done from a cap perspective. How likely is that? And then you got to think about the players involved here. Would a Justin Fields sign up for X amount of money knowing that he'd probably start the season as a backup to Russell Wilson? You've got that aspect of it as well, too. Or would he be more in line and said, okay, just give me another 1-year deal, and then having to try to work around that? The likelihood of both of them re-signing is probably extremely low. The plausibility of it, though, could be overcome. That's not a great answer, but, I mean, it's the best answer that I have sitting here at the end of January.
But you would say in reality, all things considered, and that includes the feelings and thoughts, and would Fields and Russ want that, you would say the odds of that actually happening are pretty low.
It feels like it.
Yeah. It's just hard for me to see that unless Fields just had no market like last year. It was all backup options to maybe come back to Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal and try again. But I just think given the landscape of lack of other strong options in free agency and a weaker draft class and Fields, I would say, improving and maybe the league recognizing that this year, that Fields would have some opportunities to at least compete for a job. Whereas if Russ, re-signed, it's almost certainly going to put him in pretty heavy position to start come 2025. All right, we'll go through a couple more here. Let's see. What is Mr. Rooney's argument for keeping Tomlin? That's from Bryan Tolini. The answer he won't tell you is because he just made him one of the highest paid coaches in football in a multi-year deal back in, what was it, April or something. He's not going to, those contracts are fully guaranteed. And so you fire him, you lose out on all that money. And Rooney's not about to do that. So that's the real probably answer. I'm sure he'll give an answer about something other than that.
Yeah, stay tuned for the end of January.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Any other I'm sure we have other questions. How would you guys grade Joey Porter Jr.'s second season? Some ups, but also frustrating moments with the penalties. Yeah, kind of like Benton, where there was probably maybe some improvement there, and full year starter, but just not the step that you thought. Maybe you were hoping for a leap. You kind of got a little maybe step forward, and obviously Porter wore a lot of negativity, some penalties stacking up. 2 penalties in this game, too, against Baltimore. Kind of went under the radar given all the other issues in this game. But again, Porter's like Pringles. You can't just stop at one. You got to have a bunch of them, and Porter knows how to rack them up.
What was his final penalty stats here?
16 total?
Let's see. Regular season.
That's including, I think, playoff 16.
I've got regular season was 15 total, 5 declined. And postseason was 2-0 declined. So 17 in total, 5 declined.
And again, most of those came in bunch fashion. The Denver game, the Commanders game, of course the Bengals game. He had 2 more in that Baltimore game. So he has shown the ability to play clean in moments, but whenever it gets bad, it gets real sideways pretty quickly.
Week 13, he had the 6 penalties against him in that game.
Yeah.
Week 14, he had 1. He did not have 1 for the rest of the regular season. And then in the playoffs, he had 2, which were both defensive holding.
Infinity, how far back do you go to find a more devastating playoff loss from 8-96 divisional round at the Patriots 28-3? Curtis Martin ran a while. That was the previous record for most individual rushing yards in a game before Henry broke it. I mean, putting the Super Bowl aside against Green Bay, I still think a loss to one Tim Tebow probably stick out in a lot of fans' minds. But in terms of like being embarrassed, to like losing in the sense of just playing, getting your butt kicked, I'm not sure that might be the answer there, Dave. That probably would be a decent swing at things.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Sean Stewart, 9191. Hey, Dave, Alex, firefighters here out in California. Huge Steelers fan. We listen to you guys to help get through the grind. Wish it was a better time, but love you guys. Sean, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And certainly Dave and I sending your thoughts and appreciation, admiration for all you guys are doing out there in California right now. So Thank you, man. Yeah, stay safe for sure. Don't you guys feel like it's very strange Rooney came out so quickly to say Tomlin is staying? Rooney has not publicly made comments. That came from Jerry Dulac reporting. But I wouldn't ever really call that strange. If your intention is to keep a guy, I think you would want to quell any potential rumors and buzz about moving on from that coach. And so again, Rooney's not publicly said anything, but I don't think it's surprising to hear these comments and that pushback come out from the organization pretty much immediately.
Right.
Let's see. Vergen in the Alex, I heard you say yesterday to add to the defense and get better at running the ball isn't the answer. Fix the offense. Pass more. Again, there's different ways to go through this. I just think you got to get back to basics and brass tacks. And we just kind of were musing and had the idea of, because there are so many issues in this defense, which is what Pittsburgh's still built around trying to win with and lead with. Do you fix a defense and kind of go all in there to slow down some of these, high potent MVP type of quarterbacks and try to boost this running game? There's no easy answer, and you could go the other way and have the offense try to be built up, but that requires trying to find the answer at quarterback, and I just don't know if that answer is really there to get your offense boosted in a big way. I don't think you'd even get the 2017 Steelers because you won't have a player of Ben's caliber to really bring this offense to average 30 points per game.
Right, I agree. I mean, it all starts at the quarterback position. You better do enough on the defensive side of football to compete with those, with the Bengals and the Ravens. That's got to be priority number one. Is how are you going to stop those two offenses? Because you got to win the division. You've got to, you absolutely have got to win the division. No more going on the road in the playoffs. And if you can't beat those two teams, then they're. That's got to be the main goal here. And if you're going to have to play settle for quarterback, then you better be strong. You obviously got to surround them with weapons on the offensive side and at least give them a fair shake to help overcome, hopefully, the lower amount of points that the defense gives up next season.
Yeah, got to get back to that run game is where it's going to start, assuming especially that Arthur Smith remains OC, which I pretty confident he will be, assuming he does not become a head coach somewhere. And it seems like the Jets and Bears will be the only two options unless Dallas happens to jump in because they're just getting their head coach search started. $20 super chat from Vegas TJG. Money to buy, beer to cry into. We thank you for that and appreciate the super chat there, Vegas. We won't have time to get to all of these.
I've thought about going back to drinking again.
This team makes it tempting. Kieran B, do you think it's a good idea to go with Justin as a starting quarterback and then trade up in 2026 if he doesn't work out? I guess, do you think Justin worth bringing back? Loosely and projecting out, trades into 2026, who knows? That's kind of my idea. It's a short-term thing with Fields. It's a lot of money, but it's not for a quarterback in the same sense. You evaluate him, second year in the system, more stability, go into him with a starter, with Arthur Smith, see what you can get with him. And as you do that, then you're also potentially evaluating options in 2026 and 2027 if Fields, it does not show that growth that you need to see overall. I just would kind of view it as almost a true bridge wait-and-see situation where the contract's not going to kill you short-term, long-term, and you could evaluate him, work with him as you start looking at other potential options as well.
I have nothing to add to that, Your Honor.
All right, what else do we have here? Who's man? YT, would you consider bringing Mike Williams back and give him a fair shot? I'm moving on from Mike Williams. His team needs to get younger, better, more athletic, more talented at receiver. I understand that Williams is probably still underutilized in this weak receiver corps, but moving on, Dave.
I'd bring him back on a vet minimum contract and let him compete for a roster spot. That's as far as I go there.
All right, fair enough. Art, do you all see Minka getting traded? I do not.
No, I do not.
What else? Do we have anything else? I don't know how many years are on Pat Meyer's contract. I'll try to figure out the math myself. He got hired in 2022. They generally sign 2-year contracts, and so that would, if true, that would put him under contract through 2025. If there is a change there, well, they always just say parting of the ways and never really say fire anymore or anything like that. So I would assume, dangerously, he's under contract and his deal runs through next year.
When was he hired?
2022.
And I will have to research that if it was 2 or 3 years.
I don't think they announced it, but generally coordinators sign 3-year contracts in Pittsburgh and positional coaches sign 2-year deals. The reporting that is out there, Arthur Smith signed a 3-year deal. I know when Eddie Faulkner re-upped, he did a 2-year deal. That is generally the structure. I don't want to guarantee that, and there are exceptions. Keith Butler one time signed a 1-year deal before he retired, that kind of stuff. But my assumption would be that Meyer is under contract.
Okay.
And Pittsburgh generally does not fire. They usually let contracts expire. But Dave, I think you've done a great job outlining precedent and some of those precedents that should be changing for the organization.
Right. You shouldn't be afraid to move on.
Yeah. All right. You're going to probably have to wrap things up. And there's other questions to try to get to. Just so many in the chat. We had a great turnout tonight. So appreciate that. Apologize we could not get to absolutely everything. There'll be an archive version of this on the site, SteelersDepot.com, in just a bit. So if you guys want to go back and listen and recap things, you have the opportunity to do so. Be sure to check out the channel for more videos coming out, and check out the site as we cover Tomlin's press conference tomorrow and get into the start of the Steelers 2025 offseason. Dave, thank you as always for being here and joining me during these live streams.
Thank you for moderating it, even with the kind of cough that you have there. Thank you for everybody for using small rocks. They didn't hurt as bad tonight. And who is responsible for unlocking this cage and letting us out? Peace and love, everybody. We appreciate you.
Grandma's still in the cage, right, Dave?
Right. Grandma's still in the cage.
Sorry, Grandma. Gonna be a long winter. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.